Okay, so for our project, we're going to need adhesive. I'm going to use, well, I might use the glue. A lot of times I just end up using those too. I have art glitter glue, which I love. I also have score tape in 1/2 inch, 3/8, and 1/4 inch. We're going to use some foam tape. I've got some strips left from Michael's. Other than that, I have the rolls of tape, of foam tape, and of course the foam tape squares. ATG gun. This is just to help cut score tape and clean the mats off, not that we're really going to need to. For the base of the album, we're going to use Cricut craft board. It comes in the sampler pack like this, where it comes with the craft color, the black and the white. I am actually using just the white, so I do have a pack of just the white. We need, I think, 10 sheets, possibly 11 sheets to do the project. And then I'm going to be using the Doodlebug French Kiss paper and the petite prints for to cover the base of the album. And then, of course, you know, an assortment of the embellishments and things from the French Kiss paperwhite. Let's get cutting. Okay, so we've got all of our craft board pieces. We've got the 2 pieces for our box. We've got the frames for the individual pages. You're going to keep the center section that cuts out of the frame because we're going to use these we're going to mat these for photo mats, so hang on to those. And then we've got our tags, so we're going to set the frames and the tags aside for now. And then we've got our pockets for the back of the pages, and then we've got our spine gusset pieces that we're going to use here in just a minute. Next, I'm going to pick out the paper that I'm going to use to cover the frame pieces. So what I've done with this, because I don't want to, because these are not really big, you don't want a really big print. So what I've done is I've kind of picked out which ones I'm going to use based on the size of the print and then how as a whole this is going to look together, because we need 6 different prints. You could make them all the same. It's entirely up to you how you want to do this, because of course you're probably not going to be using the same paper line. This could be modified. You could make this into a Christmas album. You could make this into pretty much anything you wanted as far as you know, the overall style of it. I just am going to make it into a Valentine's album. So I'm going to use these for the back sides, which this one I'm not actually sure on. Oops. Actually, I think I'm going to use that one instead. And then what's neat is the way this is set up. When we cut the cover for this, the centerpiece is actually going to cut smaller, so you're going to have a little bit of a border to mat onto here. So what you can do is just, well, that's not a good example, flip that over, so your center, your little photo mat, is going to use the back side of the paper that you're using to actually cover the front part of that. So we're going to cut these with the Cricut. And then what we're going to do for the backs of the pages and for the actual base pages of the album, I've got 3 sheets of the craft board here. We are actually going to cut these with a paper trimmer, just to 6 by 6. And the reason we're doing this with a paper trimmer instead of the Cricut is the max the Cricut will cut is 5.5 by, or well, 11.5 by 11.5. So even if we set this up where it would cut, you know, just one line here and one line here. It's not going to cut all the way to the edges. And then we're going to do the same thing with the petite prints. We're going to cut this with a paper trimmer as well, because this is going to mat the bases of the pages before we put that frame on there. And the reason we're going to cut these by hand as well is the same thing. We want to get as much out of our paper as we can. So if we're cutting these to 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 a piece, that still is more than the, well, no, I guess the Cricut could do the 5 3/4. We're going to do it manually just because it's going to be better use of our paper, so that we're not wasting a bunch of paper. So let's get cutting our pattern to go on the tops of our frames and as our photo mats and on our tags and what have you. And then we will manually cut these other pieces, and then we can start assembling. Okay, so now we are going to cut the pages for our album base, and we are going to cut the papers to mat that. So what I have done is I've taken the pattern pieces that we cut that are going to go on top of our frames. Okay, so they're going to go on here. There is not a border on these, and the stamp file, unfortunately, is not exact all the way around, so you are going to have to kind of, when you go to layer these, kind of turn it to figure out which way it actually needs to go. But what I've done here is I've gone through my petite prints to figure out which of these I'm going to use with which frame, and just kind of stack those together so that I'm not cutting up paper I don't need to cut up. But let's start with our craft board. We're going to cut each of these sheets. I have 3 sheets. We're going to cut each down to 6 by 6 and then just set it aside. And of course we're doing this piece of it manually because the Cricut, unfortunately, will not cut edge to edge on the paper. I totally get why, because there's people out there like me that would make things much harder on themselves trying to make every project, you know, right to the very edge of the paper, and you know, especially when you're die cutting, that's just not possible. So this piece of it we are actually going to do manually. And sorry for any background noise. I am doing this on a Sunday, so my husband and my son are home, and I have no clue what they're doing upstairs. Okay, so we've got 12 squares. And what we're going to do with these is each one of these hinges. I've still got glitter everywhere from something I did the other day. Each one of these is going to go on a hinge just like this. And we're going to sandwich them together over that tab on our hinge so that you're not seeing any of that tab on the back side of the album. Okay, that will also make this a little bit more rigid, so when the album is done and you're, of course, you know, you've got it standing up, it gives it a little bit more strength to stand up. So got 12 of those, so 2 for each page because it's a 6-page album. And then for the pattern, we're actually going to cut these 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. Now, I realized that 5 3/4 and 5 3/4 is 11.5 inches, which technically the Cricut will cut. However, actually I don't want to do it that way. I'm going to save that. However, let's see, since this is double-sided, I've got flowers that we're going to use on that side, and I'm going to use the stripes with the hearts on that side. So I'm just going to match those together and set them aside. And then we're going to do the same thing on the rest of them with the way that we're going to do this. Oops. I haven't used this paper trimmer in a really long time because it was always really hard to read the numbers at the top. And then I was at a retreat where somebody had the little crop size of this, and they had, it was all like, you know, filled in with black, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? And they said, oh, there's tutorials on YouTube, but basically you just take like the black craft paint and just very lightly like paint it in there and then wipe it off because it like sinks down into where those are cut down in. I tell you what, it worked awesome. I've actually been using this again now, which is good because the Caterpillars are not cheap. And I always felt really bad that I was not using it as much as I should because it was hard to read. Anyway, as I was saying before I got completely sidetracked there, these are 5 3/4 and 5 3/4, which when you add it together is 11.5. However, the problem is, it's still, the Cricut is still going to want to leave a little bit of space in between each one of these squares. Honestly, I may lay this out and just leave it as a hidden shape within the cut file, because I think I have a way to do it and make it work. The reason I did not cut these with the Cricut is because I wasn't sure what paper I was going to cut them out of, so it was easier to just kind of leave them and cut them manually after the fact, because I can now then take these scraps and we can use those to mat behind the pockets when we get the pockets attached to the pages. So we can cut these down, which I did actually add that into the cut file. So you'll have two pieces that will be in the cut file. You'll have the mat for the front of the pocket, which is going to be 3 1/4 inches by 5 3/4, and then you're going to have a second piece that's going to cut 3 inches by 5 3/4, which will slip in behind that to mat behind that. The reason I didn't cut them initially with the Cricut is because I didn't necessarily want that back mat piece out of the same paper as what I'm putting on the pages themselves. I wanted to use the petite prints for that. So when you look at this file in Design Space, I've got it set where everything is attached together to cut the most optimum way. So all of these pattern pieces are set into one, so it will all cut from one sheet of paper. I've got the craft board cut, so it will, you know, optimize the amount of craft board you're using. It ended up being 7 sheets that you're cutting with the Cricut, and then 3 that you're cutting manually. With the pattern paper, it ended up being 8 sheets of pattern paper that you're cutting with the Cricut, and then I opted to do the background for the pages manually. So that was another couple of pieces, and that really just comes down to how you decide to mat your pages. I had it in my head I wanted to mat them a certain way, so that's how I designed this and put it all together. So we're ready to get this out of the way. Okay, we are about to start assembling. So what I've done is I've actually gone through on a lot of my pieces, and I've got tape on here already because you guys don't need to watch me put tape on stuff. But I've left at least one piece that we are going to put tape on, so I can kind of show you what I did here. So one thing that you will notice, and this is going to vary depending on which Cricut you have when you make this. I have the Maker, so my score lines are right here. And see how they're the double score line? That's because I was using the scoring wheel tool for the Maker, and it has either the, if I can turn that around, the single scoring wheel or the double, the single or the double, you know what I mean. When it's something heavier like this, the machine tells you, Design Space tells you to use the double scoring wheel. So it's got, you know, what actually ends up being a really good score mark on here. If you are doing this with the Explorer, you're going to end up using your scoring stylus. The score lines may or may not be as clear on here, so you'll want to double check those. You may need to go over them a second time with a scoring tool. It just really depends on your machine. So that being said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put, these are our hinge pieces, so we're going to put score tape on either side of those score lines. You're going to leave the center gusset blank. So what I did with that is I actually used the 1/2 inch score tape and the 3/8 inch score tape. Just ran that down both sides, getting it all the way to the edge, and doing it on the side where the score lines are facing up. When we go to actually assemble the base of this, you'll see why, and it will make a little bit more sense why we're doing it that way and not doing tape on both sides. So, and it is easiest really to kind of go through and do all your tape at one time, just so you're not going from material to material and whatnot. So we've got all 5 of our hinge pieces, tape on them, ready to go. We're gonna set those aside. I went ahead and matted my tags. In the cut file, it will cut 2 of the little arched piece out of every, the way it's set right now, it will cut 2 of the arched piece out of every piece of paper and 2 of the little hearts. You could pop these hearts up if you wanted to. I decided not to do that because I am going to put some ribbon through those holes, but these are all matted and ready to go. The little squares that came out of the center of our frames, I've got those matted as well, which in the cut file there is actually a second square in there to go on the back side of these. I did not do that with these because I'm going to use some of the cut aparts and whatnot from the odds and ends, the paper pack, and some of the odds and ends and whatnot on the back sides of these instead of using more of the pattern paper. So those are all matted, ready to go. We're going to go ahead and also get the tape on our pockets. So once again, here's your score line. You're going to do this with the score line up, facing up. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take 1/4 inch score tape if you have it. If not, you'll want to wait on doing this adhesive until you're actually ready to put this pocket onto the page. Since I'm using score tape, I can go ahead and do it now. I'm going to just lightly fold those so I can see, because you're going to do adhesive on this side. You're going to flip it over and then you're going to do the adhesive down the ends. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, I folded that one wrong. That's what I did wrong. What did I do? I put adhesive on the wrong side. Okay then, So these we're going to have to fix. That's okay. I'm going to flip this over. That's what I get for doing this and like talking to somebody yesterday as I was doing it. You're going to flip this over. You're going to do adhesive on the back side. Because when we go to adhere this, you're going to pull this adhesive off, or if you're using your ATG gun for this little bottom part, you're going to wait and do that. You're going to fold these down, press these corners down. You get these good and folded down and whatnot, and press these down. And then that causes these flaps to stick to the bottom of this for the pocket. And then the pocket will go down on the page like that. Okay. So, that's good. What we're also going to do with this, if I can find what I just did with that piece of cardstock. There it is. We're going to go ahead and actually, and this is entirely up to you. I am matting these before I put them on the page. It just makes it a little bit easier to get everything lined up. If you want to wait and do it after the fact, that's entirely up to you. To attach my mats, I'm actually just using, you know, good old ATG gun because it's easy. You just want to line that up. You're going to have about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. So when this goes down on the page, that's what it's going to look like. I'll come back and fix those other ones in a minute. For our frames on these, I actually am going to use wet adhesive on this, and that is just simply because I've lost my pen. There it is. It's a little more forgiving when you're trying to get one shaped piece on top of another shaped piece and not have any kind of edges showing. The other thing you're going to want to do before you put glue on anything, especially with this stamp shaped frame, is you're going to want to check how that pattern piece lines up on top of the white piece, because the frame, and I did not design the frame, this came out of Design Space, is not exact. It's not symmetrical all the way around. So you do need to turn this, figure out which side it matches up on so that you're not seeing any of that white craft board piece underneath. And I think I actually had it lined up when I stacked up my stuff yesterday. Yeah, see, so that one is lined up. So we know that's how it lines up. We're going to take our glue. I know a lot of people leave that pin in, but I don't know. I'm just paranoid about it. And you're going to glue your pattern paper on top of the little postage stamp frame. I actually have a second version of this file out there in Design Space that does not have, that has just a plain square frame instead of the postage stamp. So if you know, it makes it a little bit more adaptable to other holidays or something, or if you know, wanted just a plain frame that's going to go on top of your pages. I do have that out there, and I actually do have a book made using that one, which I will show you here in a little bit. Okay, so for your pages, what I've done is I've taken my 12 by 12 piece of craft board and cut that down into the 6 by 6 for the page faces. What I have done is I have matched each one of these up so that they align exactly, so that when they are on the book and they're on top of each other, you're not seeing an edge hanging on one side or the other. When I got them matched up like that, what I did is I paired them up and I numbered each one of them. So there's going to be 12 of these total, so you're going to have 2 number 1s, 2 number 2s, 2 number 3s, so on and so forth, and then 2 number 6s. What we're going to do here is, and I put tape on both of those because apparently I cannot talk and do this at the same time, but it's okay because these actually both line up okay. What you're going to do, and just so I don't confuse myself further, we're going to renumber this one a 5, and we're going to renumber this one a 6. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to leave one of them blank, no adhesive. The other one you're going to put adhesive on, and that will make more sense here in a minute when we actually go to assemble the entire base of the book. Okay, so those are ready to go. We can set those aside. For the box, there are 2 pages that are going to cut out of a whole sheet of the craft board that have these little flaps cut into them that are scored across and down. One of them is 1/4 of an inch smaller. One of them is 11.5 by 11.5 when it's finished cutting. The other is 11.25 by 11.25. The 11.25 by 11.25 is the bottom piece of your box. Okay, so this is the 11.25 by 11.25. So this is the bottom of the box. The top of the box will be 11.5 by 11.5. Both of them go together identically, so I'm only going to show you the bottom, not the top. One thing I would recommend, however, is figure out what your top is. Adhere your panels to the box before you actually put the box together. The reason for that is it's a lot easier to line up your panel pieces when it's laying flat like this versus trying to do it on here, and you know, it kind of has a little bit of give to it, and it's not as easy. So here's my bottom of my box. What I did is I just lightly scored or folded these ends, flipped it over so that I could see what I was doing, and I've just put adhesive just on those 4 corners on the flap part itself that we are now going to pull off of here and assemble our box. Lid, base. No, this is the base. So the lid is 1/4 of an inch bigger than the base so that they slide together. So what we're going to do is we're going to just fold that up. We're going to fold that piece. Oops, let's not stick that to the board because that would not be good. And then what you're going to do, you're going to fold these pieces in, and you're just going to push it down so that the bottom corner of this piece sits onto that score line. Okay, once it's on that score line, you're just going to bring that side up and push it together. Okay, so bottom piece onto the score line, bring that side up and push it together, and then that will line up perfectly. Okay, you can push that down onto your board, your mat, and kind of give that a little rub to get that good and stuck down. And then we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. That's right, this is that other, the wider adhesive. It's not the Score Tape brand. I think it came from Scrapbook Pal. I'm not honestly sure if it is actually Score Tape just without the logo on it. I have no clue. But I kind of suspect it's not because the backing comes off too easy. When you go to do the second side, it will actually be a little bit easier because you've already got that first side standing up. And then you're just going to do the same thing. You're going to get that into that score line, bring that side up, and push it together. And there is the bottom of our box. And there is the top. And there you go. There's your little box that your album will go into when we're done. We'll decorate this here in a little bit. Right now, let's get ready to assemble the base of our album. So, what we're going to do, and this is probably going to seem weird, but I actually did my other prototype that has the other frame the other way, and it was not it went together okay, but it was not together as cleanly as I would have liked, which once you get the papers and everything on there, it's not nearly as noticeable, I guess, as I was thinking it was going to be initially, but it bothers me. So I had to come up with a different way to do this. So what we're going to do is you're going to take one of these hinge pieces, you're going to remove the adhesive from one side. You're going to take your first page, you're going to turn it so your numbered side is face down. One thing I did when I numbered these, the end that I want to be the top of my page and the top of my book, I've made sure that my numbers on both pieces are going the same way, so I'm not just like randomly writing the number facing whichever way I want it to. This way I know for sure they're going to line up exactly along the top and the bottom when I put the back piece on. So I'm going to put the number side of this face down with my top over here to the left, actually towards the bottom, towards me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up so that it is right on the edge of that score line. The hinge is about a 1/16 of an inch smaller than the pages. That's just so we don't have hinge sticking up in case, you know, and making it all wonky every which way. So there you go, you've got your first page down. We have not folded anything yet. That's fine, that's how we're going to leave that for now. So you're going to turn that page over and get page 2. You're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to turn it so that number is face down and line it up on the other side of that score line. So see, here's our score line. We're going to line this up so it's just at the edge of that score line, and that's where we're going to press it down onto the tape. Okay? So we're going to remove our backing. And however you need to turn this to see it to line it up is entirely up to you. Honestly, if I weren't recording this, I'd probably be standing up so that I'm standing like right over the top of this to get it lined up just right. But if I do that, then you won't be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so now we've got 2 of them on here. We're going to go to this next hinge, which needs to go on the other end of page 2. This is why we have not yet folded anything or and why we're not building this like you typically would build pages on a mini. If I can get that score tape to come, backing to come off. Because we don't want to try to slide these on and get them the same. We want to build one side of the book, then we're going to flip it over, and then we're going to put these down on the other side to cover up that hinge on the back side. Okay? So we're going to do the exact same thing again, and this is going to get a little bit more difficult as you go through to the end of the book, because this, of course, is going to just keep getting longer and longer and longer. But the concept still works the same. And of course, you know, if you can turn this any which way works for you. So long as we are getting this. My score tape is way too close to my line on this one, but that's okay. It happens. And you know, before you go to press that down, make sure you've got it where you want it, because score tape is not forgiving and it does not pull apart easily. I have ruined more things by, you know, having something slip at the last second as I'm pushing it down, and it's almost impossible to get it apart. So we're just going to keep going along here. Until we get all three, because I'm looking at the number 3 on a piece of cardstock, all 6 of our pages adhered together. Now, could you do this whole album just out of cardstock with no heavier material? Maybe. If you were going to use just cardstock and not find the craft board from Cricut, then I would suggest going with a much heavier cardstock. Most pattern cardstock is 80-pound cardstock. I would at least find the 110-pound cardstock if you can in a solid color to build your base with, because you're going to want something stronger than just normal cardstock, because by the time you assemble this and then decorate it, if you're using just normal cardstock, honestly, it's probably going to be too heavy, and it's going to cause the album to bow, and it may not stand up correctly. So, because ultimately what we're going to do with this after it is all assembled and decorated and folded and what have you, is this will stand up in that accordion, you know, like zigzag pattern, and this can stand like on a mantle or a tabletop or something, just as a fun little picture project and a different way to display family photos. So yeah, it is working better to pick that up and kind of line it up. And see right here, I've actually got my adhesive a little bit over the score line, which is not ideal. So I'm going to kind of just, with my thumb, roll that back. So see, I've kind of rolled that back right there. Okay. And that, once again, when I was taping everything yesterday together and, you know, getting it prepped so I could come down here today and actually film the assembly. It needs to go even further up. I was on this app called Marco Polo, which allows you to send like video messages back and forth to friends, which my roommate from college and I talk to each other on it, and it quite honestly is awesome. I love it because, you know, she can send me a message when she has time, I can watch it when I have time and respond, and, you know, we just kind of have like entire conversations going back and forth that way, and it's really nice. I've really enjoyed that. It's been fun. Been using it for about a year now, and when I was down here working on this last night, that's what I was doing, and apparently wasn't paying good enough attention to some of what I was doing, like on my pockets where the adhesive's on the wrong side. But you know what? It's okay. Everything can be fixed. It's not the end of the world. Okay, so just about there. I got a little bit close again, right there. Not a big deal. And could we have glued this? Absolutely, we could have glued this. Might have been a little bit easier because, once again, glue is more forgiving, particularly if you're using the art glitter. It doesn't dry as fast. I, for years and years, used the Scotch Quick Dry. I think the labeling has changed here recently. I think it's now like Scotch Tacky Glue or something. I know I've got some more of it here somewhere. I'm just not sure where it is. The Scotch really almost dries too fast unless you get it really goopy, in which case it will bubble your paper. This, I think, is heavy enough it probably wouldn't bubble this, but that's kind of, you know, that makes it a little bit harder. The art glitter When it dries perfectly clear. It's amazing glue. It's water-based, so like I know when I'm doing a lot of like little stuff, or I'm doing 3D projects where I am using a lot of glue and I get it all over my fingers, this stuff I can just do this and it comes right off. The scotch did not come off that easily. But the art glitter doesn't dry quite as fast, so it's a lot more forgiving if you're trying to do something where you need to kind of slide the paper and you know, and get it into its final position before you kind of press it down and leave it and let it dry. That you absolutely could do this spine piece with that if you think that's going to be easier for you. Okay, so now we have this whole long thing put together. We're going to turn it over. We're going to start back at this other end. And then we're going to now put our top pieces on here. What we're going to do with this is you're just going to line these up right on top of their matching piece for the bottom, okay? First one and the last one, of course, are obviously going to be very easy because you're at the end of the page. You can clearly go, oh, okay, this is where it lines up. This is going to be, in the middle, it's going to be a little bit more tricky, but it's not going to be that hard. And honestly, this method seemed to work better than the other method where I was bending and using the score line to get the first page lined up, because then when you're on the back side, it was much harder to get it lined up, if that makes any sense. So for the assembly of this base, this actually seemed to work a little bit better in what I was kind of playing with yesterday. So, because I had done about half of it with it bent and then the other half with it not bent yet, and it worked better. Okay, so I'm gonna line this up on top of here, get corners exact. Excuse my head as I get in here and get this lined up. Get it pushed down, and there we go. It's lined up. Everything looks good. Can move on to the next one. So for these other pieces that are not on the end like this, what we can do to make this a little bit easier is you can kind of do your initial fold, but you don't want it to fold like all the way where you're doing a hard crease yet, okay? But we can do just a tiny bit of the fold, get that started so that we have a visual on this back side of where we need to start with lining up the rest of these back panels. Okay, so once again, and two, you should be able to, let me put that down, just barely see a little bit of your back, your other side peeking up over the top. You can also use that to help line this up. Okay, and there we go. We'll just keep going along with this. Just a tiny bit of adhesive hanging over the edge there. How did I manage that? Who knows? Okay. Go in this other direction. Of course, I'm running into stuff on the other side of my desk that's kind of in the way. there. And now our last one. Okay. All right. So there is our book. So now we're going to just come back through and we're going to score or fold on all of our score lines. And what you're going to do, because you want that accordion, okay, you're going to fold one set up, the next set down. So up, down, up, down, up, so that you get that accordion look. Okay, and really, because we've got those pieces on that opposite side, it makes it very, very easy at this point to fold it regardless of which side of the craft board our score lines are on. Because you will notice, especially if you use the craft board and you use the scoring wheel, it really only wants to bend one direction, which is fine. Okay, so there we have our accordion book. So what we're going to do now is get all of those little pieces out of the way here. And you're going to lay this flat again, and we're going to attach our pockets after I stop for a minute and go fix these. Be right back. Okay, fixed my pockets. Adhered them to the back here. So got one more that I'm going to do with you. So we've got our adhesive on the outside edges. We've gone ahead and matted this, and then we've got adhesive on this back side. What we're going to do is get those good and folded, pressed down, make sure we've got a good crease. We're going to pop that adhesive off, or backing off, and you're just going to push those down so that those bottom corners attach to that adhesive. Okay, then if it can lift for me, pull that adhesive off, and then that is going to go the very bottom of the album. Okay, lines up at the bottom perfectly. Okay, now we're going to flip it over, and I've gone ahead and done the first 5 panels on the front. All we're doing here is we're taking our background sheet, and remember the background sheets that we're covering the base with on the front behind our frame. You're going to cut these by hand with a paper trimmer to 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. That'll leave you a 1/8 inch border all the way around this page. So for the frame, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to, if I can figure out what happened to the rest of mine. What we're going to do here is we're actually going to use foam to pop up this frame. Okay, that's what I've done on these here. But what you're going to do is you're only going to put that foam adhesive on the back of this on 3 sides. So you're leaving this top open. Okay, so that you could slide a picture down in here or whatever it is you decide to actually put in that frame. These are foam adhesive strips from Michaels. I don't know that they're still selling these. They would come in a package where you'd have one sheet of the wider ones like this and then one sheet that was narrower, so like half this width. I have used all of those. Of course, that's usually the reason I was buying these, was just for those strips. So all I'm going to do is just take my scissors, cut that in half. I'm going to pull one of these off of here. Put this on the bottom. It's actually just a tiny bit longer. The newer ones were longer than the older ones. I had some of both. And then I'm actually just going to cut this one in half because we don't really need it to go all the way around. If you want it to go all the way around so it's filling in that space right there, you can absolutely do that. I don't want to cut another one of these up right now, so we're just going to do it this way. Although I do have a short one over here, don't I? I do have half of one that I had left from a different package that I'm not even sure where it came from. You ever do that? You find, while cleaning, I found a whole bunch of just random like foam adhesive that I have no clue where it came from. Okay, so we've got foam adhesive on 3 sides. Make sure when you do this that if your pattern of your paper is directional, like in the case of my hearts here and my little Eiffel Towers, that you're putting the foam on the right place so that that top is open. So we're just going to center this up on top of here. And there we go. So at this point we can fold this, and this is why, because we use the foam adhesive on those frames, that's why this gusset on these pages is 1/2 inch, so that when we fold this up to put it into the box, it'll still fit in the box, but you're not crushing anything that you may have put on here on top of those frames as decoration. So at this point, really, we are done, other than, oh, I'm sorry, no, we're not. Just kidding. Okay, so in the file, I actually have, it's actually going to cut 2 of this rectangle out of your pattern paper so that one goes on top of the pocket and one actually will just slip in behind here to mat this section right here. I didn't cut that piece when I was cutting the rest of my panels because I didn't want to use the pattern up on top here. I actually wanted to use the petite prints to fill in this section up here. But all you're gonna do literally is, let me actually just get that one really quick. All you would do is you're gonna take that shorter panel, which I just cut this one too big, but that's okay. Put adhesive on the back side of it, and then you're just gonna very carefully slide it down until you have that same 1/8 of an inch border, and then you would press it down. And then at that point, really, you know, you've matted your squares, you've matted your tags. All I need to do with that is just put some ribbon on the top of my tags so I can decorate these some more if I'm going to, which I am going to do on the backs of these. If I wanted to add anything to the tags, which I think I'm going to because I am using the Doodlebug French Kiss paper with this. And of course, I have got, you know, shape sprinkles, and I've got, you know, these little chocolate ones that are just adorable. And I've got doodle pops and odds and ends and chit chat and, you know, like all kinds of things going on here. The mini icons that I can use on tags. I've got the bigger icon sticker sheet that I can use. other places. So all I'm going to do at this point is just go through and decorate my album. I'm going to decorate my box for the album and get that all squared away, and then your album will be done. You can decorate this as much or as little as you want to. It's entirely up to you, you know, just based on the paper that you have chosen. This one is kind of tight today for some reason. But when it is done, the album literally just drops right in here like this. Put your lid on, and there you go. You've got a nice little gift for somebody. You've got a nice little box to store it in if you're using it just seasonally, because this will be a Valentine's decoration of sorts for my home. So when I'm done with this for the year, this is just going to go in its box and get stored. Let me show you really quickly the other version of this that I did. So, okay, so this version I used Authentique's frosted paper. Authentique is a little bit harder to work with. I love their paper. It's gorgeous, but they don't have the range of ephemera pieces and die cuts and stickers and things that like Doodlebug has, or Echo Park, or, you know, some of the other paper lines have. So, you know, I did a fair amount of fussy cutting. This was one of the cut apart elements that I thought was just absolutely adorable. So I fussy cut some things. I used some little sparkly swirls out of my stash on my box lid. I raised everything up with foam tape. I don't even know where I got this from. I think Target, like 4 or 5 years ago. I had this snowflake ribbon that just went perfectly, so I added that and just put some bling in there. And then here is my little album inside of its box. Fully done, decorated the whole bit. It will sit out just like that. Each one of these, of course, is open at the top, so I can slide pictures down in here. And to decorate this, all I did is I just did a bunch of fussy cutting on different elements of the cut aparts, adhered these, because really, this is not a difficult project to decorate once you've got the base built and covered in whatever pattern paper you're doing. I mean, this really was a very simple decoration on this. My Doodlebug one probably isn't going to be this simple, but that's just a personal choice. You know, with this, I just did cut aparts and some little gems here and there just to, you know, add some interest to it. And then on the back side, of course, are the pockets where I've got, you know, my little tags. The tags for this album are a little bit different, that I've got just that little zigzag edge at the bottom. You know, and I did just, you know, very simple decorations on the pockets. I did the pattern paper from the collection on both sides on the little photo mats that are in there. And this is also a file in Design Space with same measurements as the stamp frame. It just has the plain square frame instead. Goes together the exact same way as the other one, so you can use this tutorial to assemble this same album. Literally the only difference is the shape of the frame and the shape of the tags. So I will share the links to both of those files in Design Space. I also will put up measurements for the plain square one, because this one you can do without Design Space. You can just measure and cut your base pieces just with your paper trimmer. You don't have to have a Cricut to do this album. You will need it, of course, for this album because of that scallop postage stamp frame. Because, I mean, I guess theoretically you could maybe cut this manually. I honestly wouldn't want to. So, there you go. 2 accordion albums, 2 different frame styles, 2 different paper packs, and you're going to get a different result out of both of them. Thanks for following, and thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the project.